Welcome back to the channel. This week's video is a continuation of the collision repair process on the Tesla Model 3 hit in the left rear corner. This quick intro highlights all the steps performed in the previous videos where we showed cutting apart all the structural components and then bonding and riveting the new outer wheelhouse, upper wheelhouse reinforcement, and the C-pillar reinforcement. This week's video we will show the installation process of the left rear quarter panel and all the finishing work to have the repairs completed and ready for the paint shop. Stay tuned to see a trick I use when applying filler on all the sectioning locations. If you're interested in learning more about the collision repair process, hit that subscribe button in the upper right hand corner so you don't miss new videos coming soon. The new quarter panel is cut on the final sectioning locations and it is overlapped on the vehicle. The sectioning locations on the vehicle have been rough cut 2 to 3 inches from the actual sectioning locations. This allows us to test fit our quarter panel to the rear door and the tailgate to confirm proper fitment. Once fitment is confirmed, we can cut the rough cut sections away exactly where the final sectioning locations will be. With the vehicle fitting, we can now cut our sectioning locations. The rear door is removed to gain access for cutting the lower location. A mini cutoff wheel is used to cut the 2 upper locations, while the lower is cut using an air saw, 3-inch cutoff wheel, and the mini cutoff wheel. The quarter panel is now taken off and the 3 rough cut sections that the quarter panel overlapped are removed. The remaining spot welds are ground down using a belt sander. The sectioning locations have to be quickly cut a little bit deeper with the mini cutoff wheel. The inside of the new quarter panel is prepped and painted. The Express 800 rivet gun is used to remove all the old SPRs from the backside, which creates a hole for the replacement flow form rivets. After pressing out the SPRs, 2 flat dies are used to flatten every hole that has been punched. The quarter panel is now test fit again so we can punch all our flow form rivets and drill our 4.8mm rivets. We need the vehicle to fit perfectly because once the rivet locations are punched and drilled, the quarter panel will have very little adjustment. We start the test fitting process with the left rear door and the front door. All 3 rear bumper retainers and the rear bumper cover are now test fitted to confirm proper fitment with the quarter panel and the trunk. With the vehicle fitting, the rear bumper cover and 3 rear retainers are removed. A paint pen is then used to mark all the locations for the flow form rivets, 4.8mm rivets, spot welds, and plug welds. Time to use the Express 800 rivet gun to punch all the holes for the flow form rivets. There will be 3 different types of flow form rivets used, depending on the thickness of material in each location. The flow form rivets being used are the S08, S18, S28, and the S38 rivets. A 1/8 hole is drilled from the backside in the old rivet locations, followed by drilling the holes for the 4.8 mil rivets from the front side. The 3 sectioning locations are now prepped for welding, having the paint cleaned on both sides. The mini cutoff wheel is used to clean up the cut lines, and the upper rear section has a hole drilled that will be plug welded. The charge port is now prepped for spot welds, and all the rivet locations are now prepared for when we install the quarter panel. The quarter panel is now removed, and the plug weld holes are drilled on the gutter trough flange. The quarter panel is now prepped for structural adhesive. The backside is prepped in 2 different ways, cleaning the panel to bare steel or scuffing the areas with a Scotch-Brite. The areas where the steel quarter panel bonds to steel inners are cleaned to bare metal, and the areas where the quarter panel bonds to aluminum inners are only scuffed. The plug weld locations are now sprayed with weld-through primer, but unfortunately while prepping the body side mating flanges, I had a technical issue while filming. The C-pillar foam is now reinstalled, and additional expanding foam is squeezed into the backside. Structural adhesive is now applied to all the mating flanges. After spreading the structural adhesive, an additional bead is applied. Sealer is applied to the charge port area and the C-pillar foam. The quarter panel is then installed on the vehicle, the rivets are put into the prepped holes, and vice grips are attached to clamp the quarter panel to the vehicle. The rear door is quickly test fit before installing the rivets. The Express 800 rivet gun is now used to compress the 3 different types of flow form rivets. After all the flow form rivets are compressed, we switch the attachment on the Express 800 to install the 4.8 mil rivets. We now fold over the wheelhouse hem flange with a hammer and rubber heel dolly. Resistance spot welding is now performed. The rear door is now removed before welding. As per the OEM procedure, welding is performed once the structural adhesive is fully dry. The sectioning locations are open butt joints with the mating flanges filled with structural adhesive, and the upper rear section is completely filled with structural adhesive. The weld is now ground down using a belt sander, cutoff wheel, and a grinder with an 80 grit disc. The seam is now prepped for body filler, feather edging the repair area with 180 grit on a 3-inch sander. The plug weld below the rear section is welded before cleaning the structural adhesive in the window opening and the rear sectioning location, prepping the area for body filler. The wheel arch is now sanded down with 80 grit on a dual action sander. The lower sectioning location is now welded. The area is tack welded before performing small stitch welds. These welding clips have all been edited together, and the weld was performed in multiple stages so the panel didn't have warpage from too much heat. The structural adhesive is now cleaned off in the door opening, and the lower section is ground down using a belt sander, cutoff wheel, and a disc grinder with 80 grit. The lower section is now feather edged using 120 grit on 2 different dual action sanders, and the structural adhesive is cleaned off the remaining mating flanges. Filler is applied to the lower rear section using a 3-inch brush and a plastic spreader. I use brushes when spreading filler in areas with multiple body lines as it spreads easier, making the sanding process quicker. The trunk is quickly checked for fitment before removing the trunk and welding all the plug welds in the gutter trough. The plug welds are then ground down and the area is prepped for body filler. The lower section is now sanded using 80 grit. Powdered guide coat is then used before switching to 120 grit. Body filler is now applied to the upper sectioning locations and the flange in the gutter trough. The gutter flange is sanded using 80 grit, followed by 120 grit after using powdered guy coat. The repair area is feather edged using a dual action sander with 120 grit. Both upper sectioning locations are rough sanded using 80 grit. Powdered guy coat is used and sanding is switched to 120 grit. The sanding scratches in both repair areas are feather edged using 120 grit on a dual action sander before applying glazing putty. The lower repair area is feather edged before applying a skim coat of glazing putty with a 3-inch brush and a plastic spreader. Finishing glazing putty is now spread on the 2 upper sectioning locations and the gutter flange. I start sanding the putty on both upper sections using 120 grit before using powdered guy coat and switching to 180 grit. Once the sanding is complete, the repair area is feather edged using 180 grit on a mini dual action sander. The quarter panel flange in the gutter trough is sanded using 180 grit before feather edging the repair area with a dual action sander. The remaining structural adhesive in the charge port and lower quarter is cleaned off before spreading a skim coat of body filler in the wheel arch. The glazing putty is sanded in the lower sectioning location, starting with 120 grit and finishing in 180 grit. Body line in the lower rocker is made by using masking tape and sanding the lower portion. Once the tape is removed, the line is slightly rounded to match the original contour. The lower portion of the section is then sanded, and once all completed, the repair area is feather edged using 180 grit. The filler is sanded in the wheel arch, starting with 80 grit before using powdered guy coat and switching to 120 grit. A skim coat of glazing putty is applied to the wheel arch, and the repair area is sanded, starting with 120 grit before switching to 180 grit after using powdered guy coat. The repair area is then feather edged using 180 grit on a dual action sander. .440 Express Pinhole Remover is now wiped on all the repair areas, and this vehicle is ready for the paint shop. Hope everyone enjoyed this week's video. Subscribe and stay tuned for new content coming soon.